Hi, I'm Rebecca Konopka, Carter County Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources.
And I'm Philip Konopka, Lewis County Agriculture and Natural Resource Agent. Today we're going to talk about hay moisture and hay temperature and what we really need to be watching for.
Okay, we want to make sure that we don't have a barn fire. They aren't super common, but you do hear about barns or stacks of hay catching on fire. And it typically happens when your hay is baled too wet or gets wet after it's baled.
Okay, so when we say too wet, what are we talking about? Probably around 15 to 20% in an ideal world. Now, every once in a while, the weatherman misses it, and we get caught and we're baling hay above 20%. And that's specifically what we need to be looking at.
Right. Hay that's baled about 15 to 20% typically won't heat past 130 degrees. And all hay will go through a heating and sweating cycle once it's baled. But we don't want it to get much above that 130 degree mark.
A good rule of thumb is we need to monitor for about 2 weeks. It will typically go through 2 heat cycles. So if you see it come down off of one and start spiking up again, don't be overly alarmed. Just random fact that if you have a 4x5 roll and you bale it at 20% moisture, to get it down to 15 is actually 20 gallons of water that you're dissipating off of that one bale. So if you stop and think about it, that's 4 or 5 gallon buckets. That is a lot of water that we're trying to get out.
It is. And so typically bales that are left out in the field, you don't have to worry about them catching on fire or spontaneously combusting because that heat can dissipate away from the bale. But when our hay is stacked in our barn tightly, that heat cannot dissipate, and that's when we have to worry about bonfires and spontaneous combustion of the hay.
So when we look at hay temperatures, usually rule of thumb is anything below 130 degrees. Let's don't get super excited about, okay? Right. If we get up to above 150, we need to watch it and monitor it closely. We get up to 180, we really need to be concerned. And if we get up to 200 degrees, we've got a fire in the barn. We need to address that issue very promptly.
If you have some hay that's a little wet and that you want to check the temperature in, you have a couple of different options. One is the more expensive Hay Moisture and Temperature Probe. Your county agent may have one of these that they will check out and let you borrow. But then you could also make one of the cheaper ones like you've mentioned on your own.
Yeah, for a couple of materials we need some electrical conduit pipe, need a spirit-filled thermometer that goes up to at least 200 degrees.
And we don't want to use a mercury thermometer because we don't want to take a chance on that breaking and getting inside your hay.
Mm-hmm. And the whole point of this conduit is to protect our thermometer. You need a little piece of string, about 10 foot long. Some other tools you'll need to make it is an angle grinder that'll make your life easier, and a hammer.
And of course, PPE is a term that we've all become way too familiar with here recently, but you're also going to want to have your safety glasses and your ear protection as well when you get started on this project.
Well, let's go to the bench and let's make our own.
Okay.
Okay, so we are in our shop on a portable workbench, aka happens to be a trailer on this one. One thing I did forget to mention, our electrical conduit needs to be 5 foot or longer. The piece we have right now is about 5 foot. What we're going to do, we've got to put a point on it. So it's usually better to have a buddy to help you hold everything. So I'm going to hand this off to Rebecca. And then we're going to be our safety PPE. Make sure we get our hearing protection in and our safety glasses. And what we're going to do is we're going to smash the tip of this in to make a point. Once you get a nice flat edge that makes our point, we'll take our angle grinder and smooth everything up and make it sharp. Okay, now that we've got our end smashed, we want to sharpen it. We've moved inside to where a vise where I can securely mount this and not worry about it flying around and causing somebody injury. We're just simply going to take our angle grinder, round off the end, and sharpen the tip. We've got one side down. Simply rotate it over into the vise, secure it, and let's go to time. Now we've got it nice and smooth and sharp. It will help us get it into the bale easier. Once you have your hay probe made, you'll need a couple of things. You may need a dead blow hammer, and you need a hay stack. If you have your hay stacked on the end, make sure you go in the flat side with the probe. A dead blow hammer will allow you to beat on the pipe and not batter the end and bend it. You'll get some longer life out of your probe. If you've got a hay stack, you want to check your freshly stacked hay. And the trick is to get as deep in the hay pile as you can, because that's where the heat is going to be. If your hay is stacked in the barn, we want to make sure that the pipe is vertical, because when we slide the thermometer down through it, we're going to need gravity to pull it down to the bottom of the probe. The hay bales are stacked where the curved side is up, so we can't get it in the middle of the bale because the probe will not go down through it. So we're going to slide it in between the bales and see how deep we can get it. And see, now we've got that down in there 5 foot. Make sure your string is secured to the thermometer. Tightly and snugly, you can go through the loop. It is a spirit-filled thermometer, so if you do break it, it's just alcohol in here. It's not heavy metal, so we don't have to worry about mercury. You want to be very careful and slide it down to the bottom of the probe and not to break it. So be gentle with it. And you can hear it hit the bottom of the probe. You've got 10 foot of string, so make sure that you throw the slack up there to where you can find it. Wait for 30 minutes or so the first time you've inserted the probe. Once you pull your thermometer up, just simply read it. Okay, if it's 130 below, no worries. If it's closer to 150, we need to monitor it. If we decide and discover that our thermometer is at a temperature of 150 degrees or above, we need to make sure we come back and monitor it. You can leave your probe into place and get a reading quicker. You won't have to wait 30 minutes or so, because that probe will be at the constant temperature of the hay. If you suspect there is a wet hay bale that's in your rolls, or a heavy bale, you may want to make sure that you know where it is at and try to get the probe as close as it can, because your wetter hay will heat hotter than your drier hay.
As always, feel free to reach out to your local county extension office for any 4-H questions that you may have.